Hey there, and welcome to the Circling the Bases podcast. My name is DJ Short, and with me here once again is Scott Pianowski from Yahoo. We are live on Twitch this afternoon, so thanks to our audience over there. And if you are listening in podcast form or watching later on YouTube, we're recording on Monday afternoon, Patriots Day in Boston, Boston Marathon. Unfortunately, got off to a bit of a late start today, and it is rather dreary in Boston there today, but starting the week, the baseball week with Shohei Ohtani is pretty good way to go, I think.
Yeah, I grew up in New England, so I know that Patriots Day is a big deal. It's like, a lot of people skip work. It's a day to maybe have a couple of adult beverages, and it's a great day on the Boston calendar because you get Ohtani, you get the baseball game, of course, you get the Boston Marathon, and then the Bruins open up their quest for the Stanley Cup. They're the favorites in the NHL playoffs. They have a home game tonight against Florida, so great day for the sporting calendar. I got lucky, DJ. I had picked up Brayan Bello and stashed him on an IL spot, and I was prepared to activate him in place. We talked about him, Bell. He's kind of that Pedro Martinez clone. I mean, he's been tutored by Martinez, and he's an interesting high strikeout upside. He was better pitcher last year than the back of the baseball card stats suggest. I think his component stats actually are in Bello's favor, but he allowed a first inning home run to Hunter Renfroe. So a tough way to get started there. But yeah, Patriots Day is a great day to in New England just to have some fun and to take in different parts of the sports calendar. And man, the full slate of games today, a lot of injuries to get through. I feel like almost every one of my teams is throwing a Band-Aid here or a Band-Aid there. So hopefully we can come up with some answers or at least some comfort for the listeners out there.
Yeah, I actually have 7 players on my IL in NL only labor, and I'm in first place. I'm in first place. So that is hopefully that's a good sign of things to come. Justin Verlander should come off the IL soon. I have Bryce Iglesias as my closer in that league. We'll get to some of these other injuries as the show moves along here. But Shohei Ohtani already today, he's given up a run without giving up a hit, I think, but has 3 strikeouts. It's the 3rd inning right now. He already has 2 hits. So, and with Bayo, like he started out strong. He struck out Zach Neto, who we're going to talk about in a minute. But then it all kind of unraveled from there for Bayo. I love the stuff, but it is one of those things where, that's the luxury of the IL spot. We talked about that in previous episodes where you can kind of wait and see how they look right out of the gate. And if you don't have to make any other moves, you can continue to keep that player in that IL spot, especially at least in Yahoo you can. Some other leagues maybe you can't. I'm actually in some kind of deeper score sheet leagues where I needed the pitching, so I started Bayo today. So we'll see how that all shakes out when I get my box scores next week. And by the way, score sheet is so fun. I've said this over the years on Twitter. I wrote a series of columns about score sheet. I think it was during the pandemic year. But score sheet is such a blast. It's a mix between fantasy and real life results. It's basically a simulation, but with fantasy stats. It's super fun. You can have your minor league. You have your farm system. You can manage a bullpen. You can have lineups depending on handedness. It's like it is the nerdiest form of fantasy baseball there is. But I love that game, and if you haven't played before, you should certainly look into it. Have you played it, Scott?
Yeah, I haven't played Score Sheet. I'm trying to remember. Somebody at Roto World, and I can't remember for the life of me who it was, and I feel bad about that, came up with the idea to have a simulation league during the pandemic season.
That was me. Sure.
Oh, that was it was you. Okay. Yeah. That was so much fun. I knew it was one of the Roto World baseball guys. It's the guy I'm talking to. So it's embarrassing. I couldn't come up with that.
No, it's okay.
That league was a blast. So we did a fantasy draft where you could take any player of like the last 40 years or something like that. But you couldn't, once Dwight Gooden was drafted, nobody else could draft Dwight Gooden for any other season. Yep. And so you get results. You get 3 box scores a day. You get to set up your lineup to certain specifications. And my team was above 500. I wasn't contender for the title, but I had so much fun. And we weren't sure in 2000. I mean, Yahoo, we were doing like Tom Petty musical drafts and stuff. Nobody knew where the world was going. Nobody knew where the sporting calendar was going. It's kind of crazy. That was 3 years ago, but
I know
I haven't played Score Sheet, but I grew up playing like Avalon Hill baseball and APA. I know a lot of people played Stratomatic and stuff like that. I'm all for playing different formats. I'm in, as it is in fantasy now, I'm in some head-to-head leagues. I'm in some smaller mixed leagues where the wire is always rich. I'm in some deeper mixed leagues where the wire is always kind of scarce and you have to really fight for everybody. I'm in the Friends and Family League. We can make a pickup anytime you want. The Retail Therapy League.
Right.
I'm in one keeper league. So I haven't played Score Sheet, but I'm all for playing different formats. And I apologize for not giving you credit up front. That simulation league we did on What If Sports was a blast.
Yeah, it was really fun. And my idea behind that, if I remember correctly, was we started it from when basically fantasy baseball was invented. Like the first year of fantasy baseball, which I would get it wrong if I had to guess right now, but I think I said 81.
Sounds right.
Yeah. So basically the best fantasy seasons ever was the idea. So yeah, once you drafted, Dwight Gooden 84, you couldn't pick Dwight Gooden 85 or 86. Like Dwight Gooden was off the board. Pedro Martinez 2000, like that kind of stuff. And yeah, it was a blast. I'd love to go back and do some other kind of idea that's more fantasy centric. Maybe for an off season. We'll have to dial up What If Sports again. But
how did your team do in that league? I remember I was slightly over 500.
I made the playoffs, but I did not win. I think was it somebody from Rasball? It was Rudy Gamble from Rasball.
Rudy Gamble won? Yeah, really good fantasy player. Yeah,
he is very good, and he was a great help in that league. But yeah, look up What If Sports. They have lots of different games you can play, simulations. And you can really turn back the clock with those too.
So what I ended up doing with my settings, right, is at first I just got the complete box score sent to me, and then I learned there was a way to actually live through the game batter by batter, and so that's what I would do. Is I would go through all three of the games batter by batter,
that's
and
fun.
You sweat it out and everything, and hope my bullpen could hold up. This is one of those things where if you have no familiarity with this, you might think, oh, is that really all that much fun? It was a blast. And it was a time when we really needed it, where there wasn't much going on. So I can't say enough how much it stepped into a void in my life that I didn't even know I had at the time. So thank you for running that. And I hope we run something back like that someday.
Absolutely. Score Sheet, you could do that too. When you get the box scores, you could actually go to the website and get everything spoiled for you. But if you want to wait for once the scores go live, you can click game by game. At bat. So it's pretty fun if you're into that. So yeah, definitely check out Score Sheet and What If Sports. So we're gonna get into the big headlines coming out of the weekend. Some big call ups, a lot of injuries, and then we'll talk some interesting weekend FAAB bids out there. So before we get into that, just a reminder, every season is draft season. Get your Roto-World Draft Guide bundle today and dominate your football, baseball, and basketball drafts. Packed with profiles, rankings, projections. Order today and get all 3 Roto-World Draft Guides for the price of 2. Plus, use promo code BERRY, BERRY, and save an extra 20% at checkout. Get those draft guides today. Get set up for football. We'll be here before we know it. NFL draft season. What are we, a week and a half away from the NFL draft? So that should be a ton of fun. But let's get into headlines from the weekend. And this is maybe selfish for me, but we talked about him on this show over the past couple of weeks. Brett Baty. The Mets calling up Baty, and he didn't make the team out of spring training. He certainly could have made the argument that he should have been on the team from day one, but he's been banging on the door since then, hitting 400 in AAA, 5 homers, 2 doubles, through 42 plate appearances, hitting the ball extremely hard. It feels like every night he was doing something down there. And then the contrast with Eduardo Escobar at the Mets hitting 125 with a 402 OPS over 14 games. I'm guessing if Baty's coming up, he's playing every day. There's no reason you wouldn't do that. So I'm expecting we'll see Baty pretty much every day, maybe initially hitting like 6th or 7th in the lineup. But, this is one of the top prospects in the game at this point. And I know Francisco Alvarez is up right now. He struggled a little bit out of the gate, looks a little bit anxious. But it's a little different for a catcher coming up. There's everything you have to manage the game, throwing out base runners in a time when, base runners are running like crazy. But Baty, I think there's big expectations right away in mixed leagues.
Yeah, a couple of call-ups this week. Baty was certainly the guy who got my attention, and we did talk about him earlier this spring. Had a big spring training, as you said. Probably could have made the team. They had reasons for sending him down, but we thought the handoff could come quickly. Escobar being in his age 34 season, I mean, it's possible this is the end of the line for Escobar. We know the Mets, they are, they're not trying to make the playoffs here. They're all in. They want to win the World Series. They want to be big players. And so getting their best team on the field as soon as possible, I thought was important to them. And as you said, it's apples to oranges with Baty and Alvarez. Alvarez had that game, but he didn't start his first 2 games, and then they throw him back behind the plate against Miami. They steal 5 bases against them. I wonder if that hurt his confidence defensively. And with the catcher, you have to put somebody behind the plate, and he's going to be okay with the pitchers, and the pitcher's going to be okay with him. And there's like a relationship there. It's a lot easier for Baty, who can just seamlessly slide in the third and just go out and hit. He's got almost equal amount of walks and strikeouts in AAA. He's even run a little bit. He's been caught twice, but at least he's stolen 2 bases, so he shows some interest in that part of the game. I think he'll hit for a plus average with some power right away. There's a good chance he's done with the minor leagues, that he takes his job and runs with it. No guarantee, of course. But if he hits the first couple of weeks, he's not going back to the minors. And he could easily percolate to the middle of this lineup at some point. They probably will bat him low in the lineup just to not put a lot of pressure on him right away. But Brett Baty looks like a finished product to me, and I'm glad. I had stashed him and talked about stashing him, and then he hurt his thumb, and I'm like, oh God, why do I say nice things? We talked about him on a Monday. I wrote about him on a Tuesday. He was hurt that Tuesday night. Thankfully, the thumb injury wasn't a big deal. It hasn't hurt him at all. He just looks like he's outgrown the minors. So this looks like a plane taking off to me. I know development is not always linear, and who knows, maybe he'll go 3 for 21 out of the gate, but I think he's ready to make the Mets, and he'll be here the rest of the season.
So it's one thing to say, Baty should be picked up everywhere, which I agree with. Yes. But it's like, who do you drop? What level of player do you drop? Miguel Vargas. They have a similar roster number on Yahoo right now. Tristan Casas as well. Garrett Mitchell, kind of in that same realm as well. Where do you see Baty versus those guys? And we're talking about like a 12-team mixed league. Like, that's probably who you're going to be deciding between, if starter or bench spot. So where does Baty fit into a mix like that with like Vargas, Casas, and Mitchell?
Well, when we're talking 12-team mixed league, all I care about is the ceiling of the player, because if it doesn't work out, you're going to find plenty of guys who have floor, plenty of guys who get playing time. It's in the deeper formats where how much a guy plays matters. And if you're going to take a loss on a player, it can be a lot more penal. Where in the shallower leagues, I'm just like, who has a chance to be a really good player? Who's the highest ceiling here? I'll take a chance on him. The only player I would hesitate to keep would be Vargas versus Baty. The other two, Mitchell and Casas, I would drop immediately for Baty anywhere. But
agree.
Vargas, I know he's been a little bit disappointing. He's not in the lineup every day, but he's just walking so much. I still think the Dodgers have a top 7, top 8 lineup. It's not quite the Dodgers lineup we've been used to. We've been spoiled by the last maybe 7 or 8 years. But Vargas and Baty to me is a conversation. The other two drops, I would make like a pinball move, just immediately hit the flipper.
I agree. So let's get into this other one, Zach Neto. Surprising call-up, more surprising than Baty. Basically because Neto was drafted last year. He was the number 8 pick in last year's draft, or 13th overall, excuse me. Just turned 22 in January. Right-handed hitter, only has 44 minor league games under his belt. Was off to a great start in Double-A prior to the promotion, hitting .444, 3 steals, 6 to 8 strikeout to walk ratio. The expectation is he's going to be the regular shortstop moving forward. And as opposed to some other teams where we see prospects lower in the order initially, Neto did hit 8th in his debut, but since then he's hit back-to-back at the leadoff spot today and Sunday. One was with Taylor Ward out. That was on Sunday. Today with Mike Trout out of the lineup. So I don't know if this is going to stick necessarily, but it still says a lot that the Angels have been hitting him lead off here. I'm interested to see what happens here with Neto. There's, he doesn't have blazing speed. It's pretty good, but I think he's more of like double-digit homer steal is kind of where you're setting your baseline here. Has a really exaggerated leg kick in his swing. You should really check it out. It's interesting. It's unique in this time where you kind of see more like similar batting stances. I think if you remember back to the 80s, there was like such a diversity in approach as far as batting stances were concerned. It's a little more uniform now. So that did stand out to me. But someone who's known for his approach maybe more valuable in an on-base percentage league. Has a really good arm at shortstop. I think that's why the Angels are like, hey, let's stick him out there and see what happens. But Neto, I'm not sure I'm like running to the waiver wire to pick him up. Wondering what you think.
Yeah, I didn't land him anywhere. I found out today looking at his baseball reference page that we share a birthday. He's obviously younger than me, so move over Nolan Ryan, move over Jackie Robinson, move over Unieski Betancourt. We have another January 31st baby to kick around. You mentioned a key point about his batting slot, and when Chow comes back tomorrow, when they're all available, I'm really curious to where Neto slots and I realize in a lot of leagues you've already made your decision on Neto. But to me, if I was borderline on him, the difference between hitting 7th, 8th, or 9th and 1st and 2nd is significant, and that would be maybe the tipping point for me. And as you also mentioned, he was a double promotion, right? He came up from Double-A, as he said, he was drafted last summer. So I'm never surprised when a player, and Brett Baty's a young guy too, but I'm never surprised when a player this young comes up if he does struggle right away. And Neto hasn't hit the ground running through 2.5 games or whatever. But I wouldn't be surprised if it's a rocky liftoff for him. Now, I do like that not that I have anything against David Fletcher, but they designated him for assignment. That's a sign from the team that they're going to give Neto a chance. It's not going to be like a week to prove himself. He'll probably get several weeks to show that he's ready. And the team is, they're in this weird place, right? Because the Ohtani contract is just hovering over the team. Can they keep Ohtani? Are they just going to be irrelevant with Ohtani and Trout? How does Mike Trout only have 3 playoff games? Why do we need a World Baseball Classic to give these guys a stage? Because they never get it in baseball in the playoffs. The Angels really, really need to make a push this year and try to convince Ohtani he can win here. And so maybe this is in a sense a move towards that. Like, look, we're serious here. We're not trying to be an 83 win team. We're trying to be a playoff team. We're trying to be a team that can win the AL pennant. So I didn't get Neto. I was open to getting Neto, and I did make a couple of token bids. I didn't win any of them, but I don't know. It's funny with FAAB bids, right? A lot of times you put in the FAAB bids, they don't come in. And I'm screwed up. I should have bid more. And then you win on a player. Like I got a bunch of some guys this week, and I'm like, oh man, where's everybody else in this player? Maybe I've just misjudged the market. In the case of Neto, I didn't win my Neto bids, and I'm okay with that. But when somebody has this kind of pedigree, at least you have to pay attention.
Yeah, I think in Yahoo Friends and Family, Shelly and I picked him up, but that's a 16-team league, right? Is it 15 or 16? I think it's 16.
Yep, sure. It's a deep league. Yep.
Yeah, so in that kind of league, I think you can add him, but in a standard mix, maybe you wait and see here. Another breaking news item on Monday: the Twins and Pablo Lopez are reportedly closing in on a 4-year, $73.5 million extension. Craig Mish of Sports Grid was first with that information. This deal will buy out Lopez's final arbitration season and what would have been his first 3 years of free agency. So with Lopez, of course, he came over from the Marlins during the offseason with a couple of prospects. Luis Arraez went to the Marlins in that deal, and Lopez is off to a tremendous start this season. 1.73 ERA through 4 starts, 33 strikeouts, just 6 walks in 26 innings. Velocity up across the board. He's another one of those pitchers who's added a sweeper to his arsenal, been a very effective pitch for him. And I'm having a little bit of envy of not having Lopez on enough teams so far. But obviously the Twins are looking at the early returns on Lopez, and they knew they had to lock him in long term. So, hey, good on the Twins for doing that.
Yeah, I have some Lopez FOMO too. I think I have him on one team. He's always had the exquisite control, and the question has been, could he take a step up with the strikeouts and go from being a really nice middle of rotation 2 or 3 to maybe he can be a staff ace. Obviously, the Twins think he can be a staff ace. I also think it's really cool that Craig Mish broke this story because he's such a great Miami connection. I guess his Lopez connections have continued even with Lopez out of town. Whenever Craig Mish does anything in the Marlins, you can take it to the bank, and I guess you can take it to the bank on Pedro Lopez, who's about to get paid. But it's always one of these things where what's the one last skill a player can acquire that could turn them from being a good player to maybe a great player? And it looks like with this sweeper, with this put away pitch, maybe this is a year Lopez. I would not at all be surprised if he ends up being like top 4 in the Cy Young battling or something like that. I think he has that kind of upside. And I'd like to go back and redraft because he was really affordable in all my leagues this spring. And I think I missed an opportunity.
Yep. Another player that is standing out in recent days, Jared Kelenic. Just wanted to give him some props here. It's hitting 441 on a 10-game hitting streak right now. I believe he homered in 3 or 4 straight games last week. 4 doubles, 2 stolen bases during this time as well. It's been encouraging. I mean, the strikeout rate is still a little high, but key kind of metrics to look at here: contact rate up so far this year. Last year was 69.5%. It's 77.4%. This year, the chase rate is way down. It was 31.1% last year. It's down to 26.9%. Zone contact rate, which is a big deal, 83.6% this year. Last year was just 75.3%. So some nice gains behind what he's doing right now. He's also just hitting absolute monster home runs. I mean, maybe he's putting it together. I think toward the end of spring training, we were talking about these kind of players that maybe are being selected late. Like, you remember like Cedric Mullins, like a couple of years ago, he came out of nowhere and became like a first or second round type of player. Like, Jared Kelenic could be that guy this year. And that was evident, from the great spring training he has, but he was a top prospect for a reason. I know it's been terrible for him so far in the majors, but maybe he's finally here. I don't know. How much do you believe in what we're seeing, Scott?
Oh, I'm open-minded to it. We talk about development is not linear, and this is why if Baty or Neto disappoint us or Alvarez disappoints us, I mean, it's to be expected. This rocky starts for guys. I mean, Mike Trout famously, his first go around in the majors was not that you want to compare anybody really to Mike Trout, but the point is Mike Trout wasn't great right away, and then the second season he blew up. Also, Kelenic also has 3 stolen bases. You mentioned that the key stats you're looking at him. The problem with Kelenic was never that he couldn't hit home runs. It was he struck out too much. And if he's getting control of the strike zone and if he's learning how to spit on those borderline pitches and getting comfortable in the batter's box, he also had a home run off a lefty, which is most of his production has come against right-handed pitching. But when he hit that home run against the lefty, that was another hurdle we want to see is can he play well enough to beat the platoon disadvantage and be somebody the Mariners can play 150 games a year. Still just 23, I believe, and was not. Yeah. Remember with Kelenic, at one point he wasn't just a prospect. At one point he was, I think, the jewel hitting prospect in baseball. He was the number one guy. He was if this player just get called up, run to your phone, run to your computer, and make sure he's not available because everybody else is going to want this guy. That's who Kelenic was, and I don't know. Maybe it's coming together now. As you said, these are not cheap home runs he's hitting. I mean, that home run he hit in Wrigley Field hasn't landed yet and tied the game in the 9th inning. I actually not proud of this. I'm in one very shallow 10-team league, and I got Kelenic in the auction. And it's a league where we were retrofitting the stats, like where you got credit for what happened the first 10 days. I wanted to pick up somebody who'd already collected some stats. Kelenic got off to a poor start, and I'm like, oh, who do I drop here? Oh, I'm sick of waiting on Jared Kelenic. That was my only investment in the Kelenic business. I cut again. It's a 10-team league, so the math is different there. But I cut him. Now it looks like he's going off, and I'm all the Kelenic FOMO, man. And good for Seattle. This is a team that was irrelevant for so long. They finally made the playoffs last year. I don't think it's a fluke. I love their rotation, even with Robbie Ray hurt. They have 3 really good starters. I think they still have a good chance. I think to win that division. I think they'll be in the playoffs either way. And because I just cut Kelenic about 10 days ago, a week ago, whatever it was, I'm convinced that I screwed up. I'm in first place in that league anyway, but no Kelenic shares this year. I don't think that's going to be fun.
So something that's really fun on Baseball Savant, like if you go to Jared Kelenic's page, you're going to see a lot of red, hard hit rate, barrel rate, average exit velocity. But the spray chart, if you go to his spray chart, first off, you could see the home run in Chicago. There's little circles on each player's page, and you can click on those circles. I would recommend clicking on the one in the upper right portion of the screen that almost looks like it's about to jump off the spray chart. That is the Jared Kelenic home run against the Cubs. It's really cool you could do that too. Like if you want any point of reference for a home run or a line drive or whatever, you can click on that spray chart and get the video right away. It's a super cool feature.
Haven't we come a long way from? I go back to the days where we did our fantasy scoring, USA Today Tuesday and Wednesday stats, and we'd all get together with calculators and stuff. And now it's like we can watch any highlight we want, and we have all this granular data. Fangraphs is incredible, Baseball Reference is incredible, Baseball Savant, who and I always thank Paul Sporer, who I had him on my podcast a few years ago, and he was talking about Savant, and I was just had my toes in the site at that point. He showed me a lot of the great stuff they're doing over there. And of course, you have a great site like Yahoo that can keep all your fantasy scoring for you. You have a great site like RotoWorld that can give you all the news you have, so you don't have to hunt it down yourself, that you can have all this stuff basically given to you in the app or given to you on the website, given to you on Twitter and everything. It's just, what a great time to be alive.
Yeah, I remember back in the day when I would, listen to Mets games on the radio, because I grew up in Maryland, so I was kind of forced to listen to Mets games on the radio. I would keep track of players' ERAs in a notebook. Like, I would write everything down, and Rick Reed's updated ERA after his start. I would track all that myself, and it's nice to get that information in real time. I think 10 years ago, everyone was on Brooks Baseball to get like the velocity readings and stuff like that. But we've come so far where all this information is right at our fingertips.
When I was a newspaper guy, we all I lived in New England. I had a newspaper job in Rhode Island, and we all did Gary Cohen imitations. How he would style the two. He'd be like, it's 1 and 2. And Bob Murphy, Gary Cohen. And I would a lot of times I would drive around on a clear night. I could catch the Mets. And again, I'm in New England here. I could catch the Mets game. I could catch the Orioles game. I could catch sometimes the Phillies. The great Harry Callis was their radio guy, who's just a titan in the industry. Baseball's such a romantic sport about just the way the pros and the companionship, and you end up just becoming, these guys feel like your friends. They feel like relatives to you. Gary Cohen feels like a friend of mine. I think I've been in his presence like twice. I'm not sure I've ever even spoken to him. And he's great at every sport too. Great basketball announcer, great hockey announcer.
He is a great basketball announcer.
He's terrific, man. And I say this all the time. Even if you don't like the Mets, they have the best TV booth going. Now that Vince Scully retired, we've since lost him. He was one of one, but with Cohen, with Darling, with Keith Hernandez, you can't do better than that. It doesn't matter if you don't have a stake in the game, and you probably have some Mets in your fantasy team anyway, because they're one of the better teams in baseball. But just listen to those guys. You feel like you're sitting with them at the bar and you have a seat at the game.
Yeah, and I think Cohen has really shown his range as a broadcaster, because for a long time he was that play-by-play radio announcer where you really have to give details of everything. But now on TV, it's kind of a little different, and he plays off of Keith and Ron Darling, their experience, and sometimes you're like interviewing them while you're doing the game, and it's a totally different side of Gary Cohen, and he's maybe better at this than he was.
He's great at everything too. During the tournament, he does some Westwood One work on the NCAA basketball tournament. He's fantastic. He was the St. John's announcer, I think, for a long time. I know he has hockey roots. He's just one of those guys like Sean McDonough who could do any sport and be great at it. And remember the great Vin Scully, right? Vin Scully used to call them masters. Vin Scully called the Dwight Clark touchdown catch from Montana. That was a Vin Scully call. I mean, he could do any sport too. And in the case of Scully, he worked for so long by himself, which is impossible, man. It's impossible to work by yourself and be interesting and have the flow and the pace. And, again, Vin Scully, one of one. And I would say Gary Cohen, one of one as well.
He's certainly getting there. Fantastic. And a treat to listen to him every day. So let's get to these injuries. There's so many. We'll try to speed through these so we can get to our FAAB discussion here. So Will Smith hit the concussion injured list of the weekend. It's not really clear exactly what happened. Like, was there an exact moment or injury? He did take some foul tips off his mask last week. He's eligible to return on Thursday when the Dodgers play the Cubs. It's unclear if he'll be ready by then, but Smith has been off to a fantastic start. Hopefully he can, get over that quickly, feel good, and get back in the lineup for the Dodgers. But it does look like he's going to miss, at the very least, miss this series against the Mets this week. Jeffrey Springs, which is a real bummer, diagnosed with left ulnar neuritis in his throwing arm after leaving a start against the Red Sox last Thursday. It was initially pretty vague about how much time he would miss, but some additional opinions on his elbow. He's expected to miss a minimum of 2 months. This is seen as more than a nerve issue. Initially, that was kind of the concern, because after he left the game, or as he was leaving the game, he was kind of flexing his hand, looking at his forearm, thinking maybe it was just a nerve issue, but does seem to be something that's going to be a prolonged absence here. May even need surgery. Obviously a huge bummer. And Springs was another one of those guys. I think we talked about him maybe the second week of the season, how we were had some FOMO not getting enough Jeffrey Springs, but Ray's off to a fantastic start. I still think they're going to be fine. But yeah, I mean, if you invested in Springs in your draft, it looked like he was going to be maybe one of those breakout guys, but unfortunately that's cut short right now.
Yeah, and unlike the Smith injury, in the case of Springs, there's a clear beneficiary because it means Taj Bradley, who made that one start against the Red Sox, 8 strikeouts, 3 runs, looked like maybe that was a one-off. Now they have a spot for Bradley, and I think he'll probably stick around. And he's a guy who they had a lot of high hopes for. He's an interesting prospect pedigree. So I've been saying all spring, any way you can get exposed to Tampa Bay, their pitching staff. I don't have any Rasmussen. That kills me. I love guys who throw strikes, but. Springs, I did kind of aggressively take Springs to the friends and family draft, which was a few days into the season. I just watched him mow down the Tigers. Right. I feel like he could have thrown 15 no-hit innings against the Tigers. And, DJ, I know teams have to think long-term, and now Springs is hurt, of course, but a little bit of the romanticism of baseball dies when it's just not uncommon for a guy to have a no-hitter going and get pulled from the game.
Yeah.
I wish we had more of that. Joe Posnanski wrote an interesting piece today about how Clayton Kershaw's going for his 200th win, and maybe 200 wins is the new 300. There just aren't that many guys in line right now in baseball to get to 200 wins. It's going to be kind of a rare occurrence. And he mentioned that even when Kershaw pitches, he may be gone by the 6th inning or the 7th inning. And he hasn't completed a game, I think, in 6 years. He may never throw another complete game. We've seen a couple of shutouts. What did Scherzer just had one, and I think Sandy Alcantara had the other one.
Garrett Cole threw a
Cole, that's right. Cole had the shutout. That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Cole off to a terrific. Talk about FOMO, man. 4-0 and microscopic ERA. I was open to Cole, and it's like I took hitters. I took Corbin Burns. I didn't take Cole, and maybe this is the year to get him. But Bradley is the guy, and I don't think I have Bradley. Talk about FOMO. I don't think I have Bradley anywhere. I would think he's going to be in the rotation for the long term, and maybe he pitches so well that he just sticks for the rest of the season. Don't worry about the 3 runs. Focus on the 8 strikeouts. That's the indicator there.
Yeah, Zach Eflin should be back eventually. Same goes for Tyler Glasnow, but it does look like Bradley will get a shot here, maybe an extended chance. He's on the taxi squad for the Rays on Monday, but likely to start Tuesday against the Reds. That's when you want to have him active for. Giancarlo Stanton, shocker, landed on the injured list with a hamstring strain, has a grade 2 hamstring strain. So this is going to be a while, at least a month probably for Stanton. The Yankees are close to getting some guys back. Josh Donaldson's beginning a rehab assignment on Tuesday, probably back by the end of the week. Harrison Bader close to beginning a rehab assignment. Oswald Peraza was called up by the Yankees. I'm not sure how long he'll be up, though. But Bader rejoining that outfield. Donaldson up. LeMahieu's been a little banged up. They can get by out of the DH spot, but I think if you drafted Stanton, you drafted him knowing he's probably going to miss some time at some point during the year. So not a huge surprise. Still a bit of a blow to that Yankees lineup. Brandon Woodruff, this is a really disappointing, discouraging one. Sidelined indefinitely with a subscapular strain in his right shoulder. That doesn't sound good. Had a velo drop in his last start. Didn't feel right in his between starts bullpen session. But it seemed like one of those things initially, maybe he wouldn't miss that much time. But now he's just shut down from throwing. He's going to be reevaluated at the end of next week. So we're talking, I don't know, probably a month at the very least, but it could be a while for Woodruff. And that's a big blow for the Brewers, who are, looking like a real threat in that NL Central for the Cardinals.
And that underscores, too, that anytime you like somebody who's like a number 5 or a number 6 starter on a team on paper before the season, don't worry about where the player's going to slot. Just think, well, pitchers get hurt and guys get opportunities. Not that this necessarily applies to anybody in Milwaukee, but it's just so hard for 5 guys to pitch all season. There's going to be bumps in the road. Backing up to the Yankees for a second. For one thing, it's just crazy to Stanton, the way he got hurt. He hit a ball that he thought was a home run.
Right.
It landed in the field of play, and then he sped up to try to get a double out of it, and that's how he ended up getting hurt. I think when you draft Stanton or procure him in auction, you're thinking, 115 games, probably the over-under. If you got like 130, you'd be thrilled. If you got maybe 80 or 90, maybe you'd feel a little bit cheated. But I'm just glad, man. I'm just glad there's an app to help me keep track of these injuries, man, because I wouldn't get anything done if I had to hunt all this information down on my own.
Yeah. So Kris Bubic, remember we talked about him last week, how good he looked starting the season. He's on the IL, has a left flexor strain. I wasn't starting him against the Braves this past weekend, but the velocity was way down in that start, and there were a lot of questions about why. It was really cold during that start, so some people are speculating maybe the weather was the factor, but no, it's actually the left flexor strain. It's a shame because he was off to a great start. Revamped pitch mix, all the things you kind of look for, the markers you look for from a breakout starter, but unfortunately he's going to be out for a little bit here. Hopefully not too long, but definitely for a little while. Max Scherzer, a bit of a question mark now too. He was pushed back from his start on Sunday due to what's being called lingering back soreness. Underwent an MRI as a precaution, but obviously not something super alarming because he's scheduled to make his next start on Wednesday against the Dodgers. We'll see, but given his age, dealt with the oblique issue last year, which clearly he was trying to pitch through in the second half. I don't know. I'm a little worried about Scherzer right now, and he hasn't looked good this season either.
Right. Yeah, with age 38 season, I think he turns 39 in the middle of summer. So there's a guy who I always had an alternative when it came time to draft Scherzer. And look, Max Scherzer's been so durable in his 30s that he deserves the benefit of the doubt. But just at that age, and the Mets have to. This is one of the things you get when you draft older pitchers is that teams are going to, when they're on the fence, they're going to want to err on the side of caution and skip starts and load management. Even a guy like Scherzer, we think is a horse. The Mets would probably say, well, okay, we can get 165, 170 innings out of him and have him healthy for the playoffs. That's kind of the goal here.
Yeah.
And so I guess I feel fortunate. Nobody wants to see the best pitchers get hurt or the best players get hurt. There's nothing satisfying about that. But in the case of Scherzer, the age just had me nervous that, and look, Verlander just won a Cy Young Award at age 40. I mean, it's not that these guys can't do it, but the age is what pushed me away from Scherzer. And for the moment, I feel like I made the right call. But I mean, pitching is, we're chasing a butterfly, and the moment you swipe your net, the butterfly is somewhere else. It's again, Jeffrey Springs. I went after him, aggressively 10 days ago. Now he's hurt. It's just one of those things where there's so much volatility to pitching. You just have to kind of whistle through the graveyard.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point about where the team's priorities are. Especially, you look at the Dodgers, look at the Mets. They want these players to be healthy in October. Would it be great to win the division? Of course. But we saw last year during the playoffs, this expanded playoffs, that it doesn't really mean anything. You just need to get in and be at your best in that moment. And I think that's all the Mets are focused on. Obviously, they want to win. They want to win the division if they can. But the point is just getting to October healthy at the top of their game. I think that will be the focus for the Mets this year.
Let me ask you a question about Bubic. You mentioned you didn't play him against the Braves, which I think was certainly the right call. How many offenses are like that for you? First, we're going to talk about Oviedo a little bit later. I'm not pitching him this week where I got him because he's pitching Colorado. So a game in Colorado qualifies. The Braves qualify. I mean, I'm wondering, is Houston a must avoid anymore? Are the Mets an avoid? Are the Cardinals an avoid? Are the Dodgers? There's some teams in flux right now. The Astros have had a lot of injuries. The Dodgers lost some pieces in the offseason. The Red Sox used to be like the Red Sox Fenway Park. No way. I don't think the Red Sox are really there anymore. The Braves are one of them. The Braves are one of the, oh my God, don't let your borderline guys near that Atlanta lineup. How many other spots? And I think Colorado still applies, even though it's not the greatest Rockies team, but just Coors Field has to be respected. How many other teams would be in that category for you?
I don't think it's many. I think it's probably like 5 or fewer.
Right.
I'm doing the daily starter rankings in our season tools on NBCSportsEdge.com this season. And, I'm putting the Tigers to any Tiger stardom at the bottom. You know what I mean? Because they're just not going to score runs. Rockies, when they're in Coors Field, they're generally toward the bottom. But the way I think about aces, it's like pitch them. It's like automatic. You know what I mean? And you can, kind of go back and forth on, is DeGrom the top pitcher this day, or is it Corbin Burns, whatever. But I generally don't avoid a lot of teams. I would say if it's a pitcher who hasn't really proven it yet over a long sustained period, and they're facing the Braves, who are ridiculous right now, then maybe I would sit them. But I think there's only a handful of teams where I would go that far.
Is Toronto in that group?
They could be. Yeah, I could see that. Or Yankees in Yankee Stadium, certain situations.
A day game in New York makes me nervous too. Just the ball flies. you see that routine fly ball to right field. No, it's 5 rows deep in the seats.
Exactly.
It can be frustrating to watch.
So we are rapidly approaching April 20th, this Thursday. That's the day that Fernando Tatis Jr. will be eligible to return from his 60-game PED suspension. His numbers in AAA are just insane. He's hitting .515, 17 for 33, 7 home runs and 2 doubles over 8 games. I think he's ready. You think he's ready?
Give him a shot.
Yeah, I'll call up this dude, see how he does. But yeah, I mean, I think it's. Would you start him if you were in a weekly league this week, or you know what I mean? Like, I don't know. I might be tempted to do it depending on the depth of the league. Like, if it's NL only labor and I had Tatis, like maybe I'd start Tatis and just wait it out.
Yeah, assuming you had the pliability in your lineup where he's just replacing the weakest player on your team anyway. Yeah, for sure. You're going to have all the FOMO when he hits a home run his first game back and you see the highlight 500 times on Twitter. So,
yeah,
I'm putting him in. He's one of those guys I don't need to see anything. I'm going to put him in right away.
Exactly. So another interesting development over the weekend is Bryce Harper. And we knew at the start of the season, the Phillies did not put Harper on the 60-day injured list. That was just maintaining some flexibility depending on how things were going in his rehab. But he's been taking batting practice on the field on pretty much a daily basis for about 2.5 weeks, and really long home runs too. Mm-hmm. He's going to hit in a simulated game against Ranger Suarez, the Phillies pitcher who's rehabbing from an injury, on Tuesday. So he's taking simulated at bats. And the Phillies manager, Rob Thompson, said over the weekend, he doesn't think Harper will necessarily need a minor league rehab assignment. So this is my question for you, Scott. Do we see Harper back before the end of April? Yes or no?
That sounds early to me, but I think the point is his timetable is ahead of schedule. And look, I get it. We have to be careful with injury timetables because whenever they ask players, everybody's a superhero. Everybody's going to be back earlier than expected. I think this is one case where it's really going to happen. Also, Harper, I think I read that on Roto World that he was taking some work at first base too. We know obviously they lost Rhys Hoskins and they lost Hall, the replacement. So they must feel really good about where he's at if they're even considering putting him on the field, because the whole idea was like, oh no, he's way too valuable as a hitter. Let's not risk him in right field. I realize first base is, at the low end of the defensive spectrum, but if they're even considering that, that's a sign that they're not worried about his health. I think Harper for sure is going to be a first half return, and I could see it definitely being in May. April's too far for me, but I think a May return is in play, and I'd be surprised if we don't see him by June. So it's funny. I mentioned that Friends and Family League draft. I'm never the long-term injury draft and hold person, but I drafted Harper, and I said, look, I'm never the guy who does this. I'm going to do it. And I also drafted Tony Gonsolin. So I immediately filled up my IL spots. There's only 2 in that league. And like everybody else, I've run into more injuries. And I'm like kind of kicking myself for why did I do this? But then I see Harper coming back. I'm like, oh, that's why I did it. I just going to, keep my team treading water. And then Harper will, turn into MVP Bryce Harper and, shoot me up the standings. That's the hope anyway. Yeah. But here's one case where I think whatever we expected back, whatever the projection of games played was in March, I think Harper's going to blow it out of the water.
I totally agree. I think the last box that Harper really has to check is sliding head first. There's some danger there with the elbow.
Nobody should slide head first.
I know
anybody does it,
but Harper does it. You know what I mean? So I think that's the last thing that they want to check the boxes with sliding. First base is kind of a way down the road potential option. He will come back as a DH. He has not really started throwing with any intensity. That's something that, it's not going to preclude him from coming back strictly as a hitter. But yeah, I think the sliding thing is the box he has to check.
I will give you a little podcast trivia. I know you know the answer to this. Dear listener, what position did Bryce Harper play when he began his baseball career? Do you remember, DJ, right?
I do remember. He was a catcher.
That's right. Bryce Harper is a catcher. And then they realized, like the Craig Biggio thing, well, wait, this guy's offense is way too valuable. Of course, I think Biggio was a Gold Glover at second base, and that's an important position too. But it's just funny how Harper was a catcher at one point in time, right fielder at one point in time. Now he's just really his position is just hitter, but he's so freaking valuable. That's, why not? Yeah. And even if the Phillies have to put out a defense that's kind of hard to watch sometimes and nobody really enjoys. Kyle Schwarber is really a DH playing the outfield, to be fair, but It's going to be a fun, even without Hoskins, it's going to be a fun softball team, man. They're going to score a
Yeah.
ton of runs. I like how Alex Baum's gotten out of the box. Even though Stott never draws a walk, he's looked interesting in the leadoff spot.
It's been good. Yeah.
Philadelphia is a really fun team.
So we're going to get to these fab bids quickly. Before we do that, just as Scott said, remember, download the RotoWorld app to receive breaking player news all season long. Stay ahead of the competition by favoriting players on your roster. Get the latest injury updates. We've had way too many of those recently. Player news and much more delivered right to your phone. It's available in your app store today. So let's get to these fab bids real quick. I actually picked up Taj Bradley in TGFBI. I've lost Woodruff. I've lost Tristan McKenzie. So I really need pitching help. I threw 200 at Taj Bradley to get him on my roster. I have Brian Bayo in that league too. My pitching's really hurting, so I think it justified it there. And actually, the runner-up for Bradley also bid 200. I was just higher in the pecking order to get Bradley, so I was happy with that. I did get Johan Oviedo as well for 35 in TGFBI, which I was really happy about. He's looking legit. He's looking really good so far. A nice surprise there for the Pirates. Like you said, I'm not sure I'd start him this week, but I was really happy to get that pitching help there.
First of all, congratulations on making a perfect bid, right? I mean, that's one thing I love grinding, not just the fab results, but how close were the gaps. When you actually win on a tiebreaker, you literally bid the least amount of money that you could have on the player and still won the bid. So congratulations. Sure. I wish my TGFBI team is hitting like crazy. And every week I can't seem to find pitching. I think Quijada, the quasi Angels closer, was somebody I probably should have taken more seriously. I didn't get it on him. Oviedo, look, 10 strikeout game. That's like an automatic pickup, and he's got good control. Yeah, I don't want to pitch him against Colorado, so I'm going to sit him for that start. And the Pirates have been more competitive than we think. Ben Cherington, I think, could maybe turn that team around in a couple of years if ownership will commit to a long-term plan. So I'm in on him. Another player I got a lot of, and this just feels weird, but I'm apparently the biggest Brett Rooker believer. He's hitting cleanup right now in Oakland. And I guess maybe I'm just projecting here because I thought Seth Brown had a chance to outkick his ADP. He was going to be their leadoff man, a little bit of power, a little bit of speed. He's hurt long term, and Rooker's a guy who has a minor league track record, but he was always old for the level. Where it's like, okay, he's guy hitting the minors, but he's like 3 years older than everybody else. A lot of times we just kind of discount that stuff. But sometimes guys just find their way into playing time, into a chance in their late 80s, in their late 20s. He's not that old. Nobody's that old. But I get it. It's hard to watch these Oakland games. And Joe Sheehan, my friend and the writer of the great Joe Sheehan newsletter, was wondering, could anybody on the Oakland A's make the Tampa Bay roster? He eventually came up with the idea that a few guys could, but not many. And I think that's totally fair. But Rooker's batting cleanup. He's hit some home runs. I'm going to give him – I got him in like 3 or 4 leagues, so I'm actually at a point now. It's going to hurt when he invariably goes 2 for 35 in the next like 8 days. But I've talked myself into him over the last few days. What say you?
Yeah, I mean, I watched him over the weekend because the A's were playing the Mets. I sat through a 17 walk game that the A's had against the Mets on Friday, which is just terrible baseball to watch. But Rooker is kind of really I wouldn't say the one bat in that lineup because I do think they have, some decent contributors there.
Ariza started to run. That's interesting.
Yeah. Yes. He looks like a player. I think they have something there. But yeah, Rooker, has the prospect pedigree. Like at one point there was some real hopes for him to be a real player there for the Twins. Just didn't really work out. And he hasn't really gotten an extended opportunity in the majors either. This is sometimes what the A's do. They uncover these players, Josh Donaldson, is an example of that too. Rooker went for 45 in Tout Wars mixed this weekend. So, affordable. TGFBI was 49. In my Tout Wars mixed draft, actually, Zach Neto went for the highest number, 212. Edward Julien with the Twins. We talked a little bit about him last week. A lot of folks in on Julien. Been hitting leadoff for the Twins. On base machine. Can he hold a spot there when Jorge Polanco comes back? I'm not quite sure, but hitting leadoff for the Twins, which is a pretty good lineup. Joey Gallo's coming back as well. Like we'll see how all these returns play out. Alex Kirilloff we mentioned as well, but I think short term Julian's for pretty fun pickup too. I picked up Nick Senzel in Tout Wars mixed for 5. $5, which I was thrilled about actually. Coming back as a utility player for the Reds, and it looks like he's going to see time between second base and outfield, so to get that multi-position eligibility. And what I like about Senzel, yes, he's been hurt so much. He runs, and especially in today's game where teams are being super aggressive, like I wouldn't shock me if Senzel, if he could stay healthy again, steal 25 plus bases this year. So I'm just one of those players like, yeah, let's just kind of see where it goes. But for just to spend 5 on that, I was happy with that.
I get the feeling that one of the smart teams, when maybe it fizzles out for Senzel in Cincinnati, that like a team like Tampa Bay or the Dodgers will sign him and he'll magically just have like a healthy season and play 145 games. And
Yeah.
like, oh, why did the Reds, DFA this guy?
Yeah.
Still just 27 and wasn't just a prospect, but he was like a top 10 prospect at one point.
Yep.
The position flexibility works two ways with him because I think he might have had a better career if maybe they just gave him one spot and let him run with it. But it's a lineup I've talked a lot about. I think there's destination in this lineup. Stevenson's one of my favorite catchers. Will Myers had a big game this week, a couple of home runs. I think this can be a Steer was really starting to hit. He got hurt on Sunday. Actually lost a FAAB bid on Steer where we backed off it when he got hurt, and then we didn't win. And we're like, oh, maybe we should have picked him up anyway. But he looks like a good player when healthy. I think the Cincinnati offense looks interesting, and Senzel can be a part of that.
So one recommendation I wanted to give here, if it's too late to make a pickup for Monday or Tuesday, so be it. But Alex Wood is available in more than 90% of Yahoo leagues. He gets a 2-start week this week, and he gets the Marlins and the Mets. The Marlins lineup doesn't scare me. The Mets have been very vulnerable against left-handed pitching, really over the past year and a half. So I think that's one you attack as well. And Wood has a reputation. He's looked pretty good so far this season. I'm honestly shocked he's out there in so many leagues, but he's one I'd jump on right away.
Let me give you another giant and one of your former Mets. I've always thought JD Davis can hit, just needs a chance to play. Yeah. And it looks like he's settled in as the regular cleanup hitter for the Giants, qualifies at a couple of different positions. I could easily see the end of the season, he's hitting like 272 with like 23 home runs. I think he should be rostered probably double what his tag is right now.
I like it. We'll have a lot more recommendations for waiver wire pickups on our Wednesday show, a waiver wire Wednesday. So be sure to check it out. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast wherever you get your podcasts. And if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, be sure to rate and review if you like what you're hearing. Also, follow us on Twitter if you don't already. Scott is at Scott_Pianowski on Twitter. I'm at DJ Short. Take care, everyone. We will see you next time.